I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. This is my first H1, so I'm going to paste it here. And I sort of have a general rule, like with an H1 or H2, like headings, things like that. If they're short and sweet like this, I'll keep them on a single line. Whereas on some of the things that have longer text, like maybe this aside, then I am going to probably keep it, sort of separate like this. It's up to you how you want to do it. And that way it makes it a little bit easier for me to see it. Okay, so you can just go down the scope here. It's really simple. And this is the point that I was making earlier, which is, sometimes just having that structure there is so much easier when you kind of come in here and you can copy and paste stuff in. Okay, so I'm just going to keep on going through here. Copy this. And where it says paragraph text, that's your paragraph. All right, list items. And then these things here, you actually are going to need to fill all this stuff out. I'm just copying some stuff in so I can actually see it a little bit better in my browser. But so like my main headings, and you can change what this says if you want. That's okay with me. But the idea is that this really is about you. So you are supposed to do more than just copy and paste my stuff in here. You ultimately need to go fill this out. So if you don't want to copy and paste everything in, you can put your own language in here and stuff like that. But if it's easy, like if you just want to keep like my goals to be my goals, immediate and long term, that's fine. You can leave it just like that, okay? But then like where it says list item, I want you to put your own stuff in your own words there, okay? And so on and so on. All right, I'm not going to make you watch me copy this. I'm just going to fill the rest in. Okay, for the most part, I copied everything. This is the last line right here where it says copyright, and it actually has a copyright symbol. That is a special character. My name, 2013. Oh, this is not 2013. It's 2016. Let's do that. So I'll copy that, and let's go into the footer, and that's where I'm going to paste that text. Oops. Let's do this. Okay, and you see how it's got a copyright symbol there? That might give us some problems. Here, let's just get rid of this now. And you can see that it's updated it for me. And actually Google Chrome is encoding it properly, but there's a very good chance that on some browsers it might not look right. So I want to show you something. It's kind of important that you can do for these special characters. Anytime you have a special character like an N dash or an M dash or a copyright symbol, a dollar symbol, things like that, there are these things called HTML entities, and you can actually go look them up. So if you go and you say HTML entities, it's a really simple thing for you to look up. You can go and look at, let's say, the W3 schools entities, and it'll show you the equivalent character name for the code view. So for instance, a copyright entity name would be ampersand, the word copy, and you would end it with a semicolon. And you'll notice that these are actually, they look all codey and stuff, but if you look at them, they're actually pretty common sense. Non-breaking space is NBSP, right? And they all start with an ampersand, they all end with a semicolon. Yen is yen, euro is euro. Copyright is the word copy, and so on, right? It's actually not as hard to remember as you would think. And so if you were to put that in here, all right, that's the actual correct symbol, okay? Okay, so now that we basically have this document all put together and it's got some basic browser styling, the next thing that I want to do is add some things that weren't in the original text file, like picture and some links. So let's first look at dealing with a picture. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. What might be kind of nice is if we were to decide to put a picture like maybe up at the top next to where it says, hi, I'm so-and-so. So if we were to look in the HTML code and try to figure out maybe the best placement for that, I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is just have it go before the H1, because then what I can do later, we can't do it yet because we're not getting into styling yet, but when we start doing stuff with our style sheet, because our second assignment is going to be based off of this first assignment, where you're going to get into the CSS part of it. But in the second assignment, we can make them float next to each other and stuff like that if we want to. But in this assignment, just know that it's going to be kind of, to some degree, what it's going to be. First of all, I need an image to work with, and so let's go find something. It should be a picture of yourself, so to be fair, I'll use a picture of myself. And so what I can do is I've already grabbed something that's, you know, it's like a photograph of myself, right? And one of the things I want you to check out is if you're on a Mac, you can right click and you can say get info. If you are on Windows, you can right click and get the properties. And you can see how big the file is in its dimensions. So one of the things you're going to notice about this file is that it's pretty big. It's 1760 by 1760. That's a pretty large file, and a lot of you guys, when you go to find images on your phones or on your computers of yourselves, you're probably going to have pretty big picture files. If you look here, it's 1.6 megabytes on a disk. So that means that it's a really large file. This file really shouldn't be this big. There's no reason for us to have it that big. And what happens is if a file is too large, it's going to make the load time of the page pretty long. It's not going to seem like it's a long time to load on your computer when you're doing it on your computer, because the file is already on your computer and your computer has access to itself, right? So it'll load quickly. But if you were to try to grab that same thing off of the network, then it might really slow the page down a lot, and it might not load in a timely fashion. So I want to show you a couple of ways before we even insert this, how you can make the file size a little bit smaller. It doesn't have to be the exact size, because later when we get into CSS, we want it to be able to have some flexibility in its scale, but it does not need to be 1760 pixels wide. If you were to look at my screen dimension right now, that's bigger than my entire screen dimension. It's unnecessary. So I'm going to close that. There are two ways you can do it. You can either use Photoshop, all right, or you can use a free tool called Pixlr, and I'll show you Pixlr first since it's free, because you might not have Photoshop. So if you just go to a web browser and you type Pixlr, just do a little quick search in the Google search bar. The first hit that you should get probably is going to be pixlr.com, and then it has sort of like this little list underneath it that's kind of like a small sitemap. What you want to do is use the Pixlr Editor. Okay, it's a live online editor, so I'm going to open this up bigger so that I have more room. All right, so you probably are going to want to do that. Open your screen up to a pretty decent size. Okay, and then it gives you a quick link option here. I'm going to open an image from my computer, and it's going to be that pic.jpg that's on my desktop. Okay, and I'm going to move some panels off to the side so that I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. And I'm not going to do anything crazy. You can go kind of explore and go to town. I'm not going to go too deeply into this right now. Right now I'm just going to talk about some basic stuff about image size. So if I go with this picture, if I go up to image while I'm in the Pixlr editor and I go to image size, right, then it'll tell me how big this thing actually is. I don't need this file to be that big, so what I'll do is, let's say that I don't want it to be any larger than about maybe 600 at the most, probably not even that big, honestly. Let's just say 500 by 500, and we'll say OK. And then you see that it looks really tiny, but you'll notice down here in the bottom left corner, that's only showing it at 34%, because when I first opened it, it was too big for the screen, so it scaled it. So if I type in down where it says percentage 34 and I type 100, that's going to be the actual dimension, and that is a pretty large image, and honestly I probably don't even need it to be that big. So if I really wanted to get my file size down, I could go even smaller than that. I could probably do, let's say, 400 by 400. And then that way it gives me some breathing room in case I do want it to be at least this big, if it floats next to something, or I don't know, whatever. Okay, and so I have that. And then the other thing, there's some other things that you can do, like filters. If you need to play with the filters, you can play with the filters. Like if I needed to sharpen this a little bit, I could sharpen it. I don't know that I really liked that, so I'm going to undo it. Anyway, but you can mess with that. You can play with the color. There are a lot of different options here that I'm not going to spend the time going into. But what I can do now is I can go File, and then I can go over to Save. And I'm going to save this on my computer. If you wanted to create an account, you could keep an online Pixlr library, which is fine. And I'm going to call it pic, and I'll call it -400 so I know how big it is, like what the highest resolution is. And then it gives you some different formatting options. We're not going to talk about pictures extensively right now. Right now I would suggest either JPEG, which is going to be good for photographs. It also has compression, so it can make it smaller. PNGs don't have compression, so I wouldn't recommend it, and I would not recommend anything below that. So I'm going to keep it at JPEG, and it gives me a quality option because it is compressed. So I'll leave the quality at 80%. And right now it's telling me down here next to OK, it's telling me it's going to take it down to 33 kilobytes. That is so much smaller than 1.6 megabytes, right? So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say OK. It's going to ask me where I want to put it. I'm going to actually put it in my folder. So I'm going to go into Matt125 last name, first name, and then I'm going to go into my first assignment folder, which is where my current website is that I'm working on. And then this is really important that you put this here, okay? That you don't just willy-nilly save it somewhere on your computer, because later when you go to upload stuff, it won't be there to upload, and it will be broken on your website that I have to grade. So go into your assignment 1 folder, and you're going to create a new folder that is called images. Just click create, and you're going to save it inside of the images folder that is inside of your assignment 1 folder. And the reason, even though we're just going to have one picture potentially right now, we might have some more pictures later with the second assignment, but you should always keep your stuff in a folder called images, because you really never know how many pictures you might end up having, and you don't want them just floating around inside of the root level directory. It's an important part of file organization. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm not going to save the original. I don't want to bother with it because I already saved it on my computer, so I'll hit no. I can close out of this, and I can actually leave Pixlr if I want to, right? Or you could just leave it open in case you want to go back to it. That's fine too. Now the other way for you to work on that would be is if you wanted to open it in Photoshop. So if I go into Photoshop and I go into open pick again, I'll just show you how you can do this in Photoshop. All right, there's that picture again, and you see how it's very similar to Pixlr? Actually, Pixlr is very similar to Photoshop. And it's showing it at 66.7, basically 0.7%. If I were to change that right now to 100, you can see that it's actually quite large. So let's just take it back down a little bit. To actually change the real dimensions, you would go up here to image, and you would go to image size. Okay, and then I would change this down to 400, and you'd be able to see that it gets smaller, and it also does show you the difference in file size. So I can say okay, and then I can put this back at 100 so I can actually see the real size of it. And then I could go and this has a different option. You would go to export, and you could say export as, okay? And when you go to export as, it'll give you some different choices up here. It'll ask you if you want to save it as a PNG, JPEG, etc. We can keep it at JPEG. We could lower the quality a little bit, and then it'll show you, you know, the difference in quality. And so we can also type the value in as well. All right, it's very similar. And then everything else is fine. You do want to leave this on, convert to sRGB. That's a color space that the web uses. And then you would just say export all. And then you would, again, tell it to save it in the correct location, which would be in that images folder that you would be making. All right, so I'll call this pick 400, and it will end up overwriting the old file. Okay, just replace it. It's fine. Okay, so that's how you can do some basic image sizing in either Pixlr or Photoshop, and basically also, again, like the other one, hit don't save, otherwise you're going to save over your original, and you don't want to do that. So now we've got this other one that is on our images folder, and we can go and use it now. So in the next video, I am going to show you how to integrate it into your HTML.